Nichole, while she gets hooked up here, is we're kind of moving now across the border to hear a little bit about Canada at this point. So she works for the Langley Environmental Partners Society as the executive director there and leads the initiative to encourage citizen involvement in ecological stewardship in the Fraser Valley. And she's been working in this field for quite a long time and has been working in the watershed since 1998. So she's got great insight into that northern part of the border, which we talked a little bit about. You either get a map up there or a map down here, and so it's kind of neat to hear about the coordination of efforts. And so,
very good. Thank you very much. Yeah, I have to say that seeing all of the information that's coming out of the States here and all the data that's being collected, I'm a little bit jealous because of the work that's happening in Canada is a little bit different. So I'll just sort of introduce myself. In 1998, I started working with Langley Environmental Partners Society, and my first task, I guess, was working with the Bertrand Creek Enhancement Society, and they had a grant that was from the North American Fund for Environmental Cooperation with the Nooksack Salmon Enhancement Association and Langley Environmental Partners Society had a cross-border cooperation on Bertrand Creek. So there was projects going on down here and there was projects going on up there, and we shared the funds. And so that was kind of my first introduction to Bertrand, so it's always been really close to my heart, and there's been a number of cross-border conferences like this that I've attended over the years, and I always find them really, really valuable. So here's a map of the Canadian side of the Bertrand Watershed. The Bertrand is in the township of Langley, municipality in British Columbia. Up on the top, we have a pointer here, yes. So up in the top, in this area here, is the Headwater Wetlands of Bertrand, and they are located on the Department of National Defense lands. So they are, there's actually big gates and fences, and you're not allowed in there. So they are fairly protected. And they're actually Oregon spotted frog habitat, which is an endangered species on the national list in Canada. And then as you move through from the wetlands, as it comes into here, this is a very urbanized area, Aldergrove. And then as it moves through into this area, it goes into the agricultural area. There is a number of tributaries that come off here, which are fairly well vegetated, a lot of spawning gravel, and so there's some really good habitat for salmon in there. There is, kind of goes off the page here a little bit, there's a tributary called House Creek, kind of runs through there. There's another one, Cave Creek, that runs through there, the main tributaries of Bertrand, and then crosses at Zero Avenue. And in the watershed, there is a mix of residential areas, very high residential area in Aldergrove, commercial space. It runs right through the center of a mall. There's large-scale agriculture, a lot of rural residential, and then hobby farms in the agricultural areas. There's a confined shallow aquifer that underlies the watershed that provides the drinking water for residents. Though there have been water restrictions with the use of the aquifer in the last 3 years, there's been stage 3 restrictions because the water levels of the aquifer are dropping, which is affecting some of the flows down farther in the creek. And they're actually in the process of bringing a water line of water from surface water sources into Aldergrove to try to augment that. Bertrand has 3 species of Pacific salmon. We have Chinook, coho, and chum salmon. There is 1 species of concern on the provincial blue list. It's not quite endangered, but they're watching it, and that's coastal cutthroat trout. And that's
your
car. He's in my car this morning. One of those days. And we have 3 endangered species in the watershed. I mentioned the Oregon spotted frog up in the wetland area, and we also have the Salish sucker and the Nooksack dace, which are on the Canadian federal red listed. So some of the urban factors that influence Bertrand, you can see it is running right through. This is very common. There's a number of bridges that go over the creek. Runs through backyards, it runs through commercial areas, so there's actually kind of a mall where the stream is running right through the parking lot of the mall, and is 3 or 4 bridges over that. The population of Aldergrove, 12,000, so it's not a huge town, but it is big enough. The stream in the 1970s was fairly channelized, so although it's not a straight shot, it does meander through town. There's no tributaries or wetlands or anything that are coming off of the main stem. There's a relatively limited riparian area. I'm going to say probably less than 5 meters in most areas. And that riparian area is under heavy attack from beaver. So we go out very often wrapping, caging around the trees for the limited amount of trees that are there are constantly being gnawed at. So we try to limit that damage. There is quite a bit of stormwater runoff that happens there, so some degraded water quality happening from that road runoff. And it also creates that flashy system as, you know, when we get the rains, the stream water rises very high and then drops back down again within that 24-hour period. So it's a very flashy system. We have a lot of concerns in the Aldergrove area of litter and dumping. We are constantly running stream cleanups. We do streamside cleanups year-round, and then in-stream cleanup where we actually have residents get up and put on their hip waders and jump into the stream, and we're constantly removing, like literally couches, shopping carts. Like, it's unbelievable the amount of stuff that we pull out of that creek, and I often wonder sometimes if we didn't do it, would there be a creek? It would just be filled. I don't know what the mindset is of people that think, I'll just put my couch here. I always say fish don't shop, they don't eat shopping carts. And then we also deal with invasive plant infestation, so largely blackberry and also Japanese knotweed that we've been dealing with and trying to do some stem injection. And of course, when you're dealing with the riparian area, you're dealing with, you know, you're not supposed to use herbicide within a meter of the stream, so we're doing stem injection. So we haven't really been doing a huge amount of that because it is very labor intensive.
Sounds kind of fun.
Down there with a little gun injecting. And then when we move into the agricultural area, some of the agricultural factors are riparian removal. As I've mentioned, there is a fair amount of area of the agricultural rural area that is quite vegetated, and that's great. However, we are finding that as land changes hands, people are moving in, and there's more and more riparian removal that is happening. So we've been trying to work with property owners to instill the benefits of that streamside vegetation and the reasons why it benefits their property not to remove it. Manure storage is a bit of an issue. You know, people have horses, and behind the barn they've got mount manure, and so we have a program to actually go out and talk to horse owners about proper manure storage, manure composting, and trying to get the water out of the manure and the manure out of the water. Nutrient and pesticide runoff, livestock access as well, having not only cows, horses, sheep, goats, that type of thing in the stream. And then because of that flashy system and the removal of vegetation, bank stability and erosion in some areas is an issue. So some of the stewardship actions that have been done, my organization is Langley Environmental Partner Society, and we are a nonprofit that is based in the Langley area. We work on a wide variety of, I think there's 13 watersheds in the Langley area that we are doing some interaction with. In Aldergrove, specific on Bertrand is the Bertrand Creek Enhancement Society. So these are community volunteers who live in the area, who have an interest. They have monthly meetings. There's a couple of teachers who are actually running environmental clubs in their schools focused on Bertrand Creek. And so LEPS is kind of that umbrella organization that supports the volunteers in the work that we're doing. Over the past 3 years, I believe, LEPS has had a focus on Bertrand. We have had a number of federal grants, and we've done a project called the Bertrand Watershed Enhancement Team, the BWET program, which has really gone out, and we've done landowner contact to all of the property owners. We've gone out and offered free land care site visits, so we go onto the property and take a look at what the state of the stream is. We've done about, I think there's been about 15 sites where we have done invasive species removal, where we've done riparian restoration, where we have provided advice on manure storage options and that type of thing. That's been coupled with a lot of tree planting, stream cleanup events, storm drain marking, which is painting the yellow fish in the urban areas to remind people that all drains lead to fish habitat, some community education. And so that's sort of focused right on the landowners that live on the stream as well as the broader community, and really talking about Bertrand and why it's important and why it's special. And it's kind of, you know, what we realized as we were doing this is that when we're looking at effectiveness monitoring, there was really no historic water sampling data. Little bits here and there, but really not a lot. And so we thought, well, there's obviously a gap. There's a hole here that needs to be filled. And so that just sort of started a little bit of an ad hoc water quality sampling program. So Bertrand is just one of our sites. We have sites, like they say, in watersheds throughout Langley. Our water quality sampling is essentially volunteer-based. We got a little bit of funding to hire a coordinator for the first year to kind of put the program together. Now it is run as no coordination off the side of the desk sort of a program. There's the Royal Bank of Canada. RBC has a project called Blue Water, and so that funds all of our supplies. It's completely volunteer-based, so we're using meters, a colorimeter, a DO meter, and a conductivity meter. There's no lab analysis at this point, but we are interested in testing for fecal coliforms and would like to move into that realm, if you will. It's been going now for 2 years, and we're testing for very basic parameters: ammonia, dissolved oxygen, nitrate, pH, phosphate, conductivity, temperature, turbidity, and total dissolved solids. So some of the things that we found, we have 6 sites in the Bertrand. We've got 2 in the urban area, and then 4 in the more rural agricultural areas. And we also had, there was some limited sort of historic data that we were able to track down, which we have integrated into some of our readings. So some of the results that we have found, the results of concern are, the concern is based on, does it exceed the readings for either Canadian or provincial guidelines for aquatic habitat, freshwater aquatic habitat. So in some of the sites we have found too high dissolved oxygen readings. Some of the sites we found too low dissolved oxygen readings. And so that's likely eutrophication, high nutrients from photosynthesis of plants, or farm runoff that's creating that. All of our phosphate testings that we've done throughout our 6 sites have been higher than our recommended guideline. And that's in the agricultural areas, probably farm runoff for nutrients. In the urban area, probably dog poop is the biggest issue, unfortunately. There's walking trails throughout, and there's a lot of people that don't pick up the pet waste. High nitrate readings throughout, both in both urban sites and in the farm sites. So again, probably animal waste there. We have had low pH readings in all of the sites, and so that's probably algae presence, and high summer temperatures, particularly in areas, obviously, where you get lack of vegetation, the water is warming up, and it's affecting those downstream areas. And we have had in Otter Park, which is this site here, very well vegetated. A lot of spawning gravel has completely dried up the last few summers, so that is, maybe correlated with the falling aquifer levels, something like that. And so that's a little bit of concern, obviously, for fish presence. And I think one thing I can mention with Bertrand Creek is that our federal Department of Fisheries and Oceans has a program with community advisors. And so these are people who are there to help volunteer-run hatcheries, to help volunteers who are doing stream stewardship. And unfortunately, our community advisor has never done a lot of work in Bertrand because they see them as American fish. So we've got salmon that are coming up from Bellingham Bay through the Nooksack. They're spawning in these reaches. We have seen them as far as Bertrand Creek. They spawn, they rear, and they head on back down into the Nooksack and into Bellingham Bay. And so typically, unfortunately, our fisheries is saying, well, we're not going to put a lot into that creek because those are the American fish. And
so you guys don't catch any of them, right?
That's right. They don't all go into that shared big Pacific Ocean. I'm sure they all stay below the 49th parallel. So that has been a little bit difficult for us. We can't do things like fish releases into Bertrand Creek because they are different genetically, which is a really good way to engage the community in sort of salmon stewardship and understanding. Because people go, oh, like, look at this creek, there's no fish in here. Well, the fish that are in there are this big. There's these poor little things that are like fighting to survive. And so it's really trying to get the message across that Bertrand is a vibrant system, that there are a lot of fish, and that it is important. So that's it for me. In closing, basically, we are interested in doing more sampling. We realize that there is, a bit of a data gap, not only on the Canadian side, but then when I look at all the great work that's being done on the US side, we would love to try to do a little bit more to reflect what's going on there and be able to share that data. We are interested in doing some lab analysis. Some of the other watersheds that we've been working on, they have tested for E. coli and fecal coliforms in the lab. We have not done that in Bertrand, but that is something that the group is interested, that Bertrand WQ Conference Society is interested in seeing done, so we're looking at perhaps some of that in the future. And in any way that we can sort of share data or do some data matching with what's being done down there, and can we do that in Canada to sort of complete that watershed outlook, we're definitely interested in doing. That's it for me.